Hey, welcome back to the Heel Toe Corner Club. Today we've got the TLX Type S back up on the lift, and this time we're talking about Racingbrake brake rotors. Can you believe 1,800 bucks for a set of 4? Why are they so expensive? Well, I'll tell you why in this video. These are 2-piece rotors, and they're going to replace the old heat-checked, worn-out, ugly-ass original rotors. These ones will take a much bigger beating. So come with me. Let's check them out. I'll show you all about them and how to put them on the car. All right, here they are. We got the Racingbrake 2-piece front rotor and rear rotor. The differences between these rotors are really vast. You got a lot of weight savings when you go to a 2-piece rotor versus a 1-piece. This is a forged hat that's been specifically machined to fit on the TLX hub. This is an all 1-piece iron rotor, which is pretty conventional, and so it's pretty heavy. Here, only the outside is iron, and so you do get an overall weight savings. The factory brake rotor in the front is 25.7 pounds. In the rear, it's 11.9 pounds. The Racingbrake rotor in the front is 19.1 pounds for a weight savings of 6.6 pounds on each front rotor. The rear rotors save about 1.2 pounds as they're 10.7 pounds each from Racingbrake. All in, you get a 15.6 pound weight savings on the whole car by installing these brake rotors. Most 2-piece rotors have a hat that's pretty much designed just like this, but then the rotor ring has mounting tabs for each one of these locations all the way around the outside. But what you'll notice is that most of the time, pretty much all the time, the mounting tab is either all coming off of the top face or all coming off of the bottom face. If you look really closely here at these rotors, you'll see that this mounting tab comes off of the outside face for this tab from the hat to bolt onto. When you move to the next one, you can see there's a gap here. Maybe over here you can see a little better. There's a gap because this tab comes from the opposing face of the rotor. And so it sort of alternates all the way around the rotor, and what that does is it gives you an equal number of mounting tabs on the front face and the inside face, and that will draw heat evenly from both faces, giving you a much more stable temperature profile across both faces of the rotor. That's something that maybe people get lost on a little bit, that one of the benefits to these, beyond being weight saving, is the aluminum hat acts like a really good heat sink for the whole rotor. Heat will come from these rotor rings, where it's generated by the brake pads, dissipate into the hat, and then dissipate through the wheel. All that aluminum sucks up heat really quickly and sheds it quickly as well. So getting heat transferred to the wheel and then to the air is a really strong benefit of a 2-piece rotor like this. So heat management is definitely one of the benefits of this rotor. And you can see from the factory rotor here where all of the hot spots are for me doing track days with the TLX Type S. All these little spots here are places where it's gotten very hot and the material has been affected. It actually gets hot and cold in these different spots, and because the heat somewhat tempers the alloy in the material, you'll get areas of high and low friction, and that's what can kind of cause some shaking after a little while. These rotors are not warped. One thing that people like to say is that the rotors get warped, and that is actually largely a myth. In order to warp these rotors, such intense, insane heat would be needed. They'd have to be glowing red hot for a sustained period of time. So whenever you hear somebody talk about warped rotors, it's not really what's happening. You end up actually getting uneven pad deposits on here, which we talk about in our brake pad change video for the TLX Type S. So definitely watch that video for more on brake pad deposits and how they contribute to shaking. But one of the reasons why brake pad deposits build up is because the heat builds up in the brake pad and it can't dissipate. The rotor is supposed to suck that heat away and get rid of it. And when it doesn't, you start getting really weird pad activity, shaking, they can crack. So in order to have the brake pads stay in good condition for longer, better heat management from something like a rotor like this is going to really be helpful. So there's many ways actually, in addition to the aluminum hat and these alternating tabs, that these rotors provide better heat management. Just looking on the outside, you can see there are these holes in the slots. Now these are not drilled and slotted rotors. Drilled rotors would have drills all over the place like this, or called cross-drilled because they cross-drill through. These are actually CNC machined slots here, and they're put in very strategic place so as to not coincide with the vanes on the inside. You can't just throw a bunch of holes in these because the vane pattern in here is actually specifically designed to pump air through as well. And that's why I'm going to turn both these rotors on their edge so you can kind of see a little bit more what I'm talking about with the vanes. Okay, now look at how the vanes are designed in here. There's a little bit of like a webbing in the factory rotor, and you can see that the vanes are a little bit on the short side, especially on the outside. But one of the main things here is that the vanes here are straight versus over here they are curved, right? Now why are they curved? They're curved to make the rotor directional. Curved vanes on the inside are going to provide a little bit more of a pumping action than straight vanes would. These are not directional. The Racingbrake ones are directional. You'll notice that the Racingbrake ones are marked right and left so that you don't put them on the incorrect side. And just so you know, right is on the right side of the car where the right turn signal is. It's always from where the driver's seat is, so don't get confused on right versus left. So anyway, a little bit more about vanes. One of the things I want to show you, I'm going to use this pen here. Where the vane is, that's where these heat swells have happened in the rotor. But inside the rotor, other vanes going like this, and I think, I can't really see all the way inside, but I think you're getting a pattern something like this. And the reason why they do this is so that there's plenty of air gap in between all of these vanes so that it acts as a better heat sink. The vanes will work a little bit better this way. But as you can see, they've gotten so hot anyway that these vanes, I'm not really sure how effective they really are. I mean, I guess without any vanes, I probably would have a much worse rotor than this. But over here on the Racingbrake side, these vanes curve in this sort of a fashion. My art skills are failing me. This is the terrible pen for doing this. The vanes come all the way through, and then they actually have other vanes inside here. And they get closer together on the inside than they are on the outside. So when you have these closer together here and more open out here, what happens is you get a little bit more of a pumping action, so air gets drawn through better. Also, because they're open on the inside, more air can get in from both sides to travel through the rotor in order to cool it off, as opposed to the factory rotor, which the only way that heat can travel through there is through the backside. And you can see the backside has gotten very hot indeed, right? Yeah, the vanes are pretty short in here, and you could just see that while there's plenty of room for air to get through here, it has to come through the backside, and then it just doesn't seem to be doing as good of a job as it could be doing throughout. The Racingbrake rotor promises to have better airflow and better ability to shed the heat, especially since it's got these holes in it, the convergent vane design, open hub all the way around, and airflow is going to be much better over here. That's just key to getting rid of the heat. So, as we continue talking about these rotors, and who knew that there would be so much to say about rotors, I want to make some comments about longevity, right? Now, the original rotors on here are still in good shape. They're smooth braking, and you know, if I put new brake pads in there, they would still be fine for service. They may, you know, they may not have much of a life after I did all this heat checking to them, but they're still good to go. I only have about 9,000 miles on these rotors, but again, 2 track days, factory brake pads. They definitely look like they need to be replaced, especially given the fact that I'm just going to end up abusing them more and more and more. Talking about longevity in Racingbrake, though, is another important talking point. Not all iron rotors are made the same. The material that Racingbrake uses is actually a higher carbon and oftentimes heat-treated formula that is much more wear resistant than your standard gray alloy that is used on most brake rotors. So what you're going to find with these Racingbrake rotors is even with more aggressive brake pads and more aggressive driving, they will last longer than the original rotors will. They don't wear down quite as quickly, so you'll get plenty of life out of them. In the past, we've sold Racingbrake rotors and they almost are considered to be like lifetime rotors. They can last 100,000 miles or more, multiple pad swaps, unless you of course abuse them too much. So the material is something that you can't see on the outside that definitely is a benefit over the long run. It's a big investment up front for these rotors, but they'll pay you back probably near the life of the car. And even when you do wear out the rotor rings, you just have to replace the rings, not the hat. So you're not into the full price tag the next time you have to do your brake rotors. The Brembo calipers and the red calipers on the rear of the TLX Type S really does need a nice looking rotor to fully stand out, especially if you've got upgraded wheels like those really sweet Acura Y spokes or even the Titan 7 wheels that we have on our TLX. So showing off those brakes is a real big benefit of these Racingbrake rotors. Since we got all four here, I think I'll give you a couple of comments about the rear rotors as well. You'll notice that the rear rotors are much more mild looking. They're still two-piece and quite lightweight. They're about 1 pound less than the original. They're not vented. It's a solid rotor, and they do have the groove pattern machined in them to match the front rotors. But one thing that you really need to keep in mind is that the rear braking, the number one job of the rear brakes is just to keep the rear end of the car behind you when you're into the brakes really heavy. So you're not going to end up experiencing quite as much heat or any of these shaking issues or anything like that in the rear. Just so much more of the braking bias is towards the front. So while we're doing the rear, this is almost 100% an aesthetic upgrade, except for that 1 pound weight savings that we're getting per corner. All right, folks, the moment you've all been waiting for. That's enough blah, blah, blah about these brakes. They look so cool, but we got to see what they look like on the car with those sick red Brembo calipers behind our Titan 7 TS5 wheels. All right, these rotor screws are the bane of everybody's existence. These things always strip. It's a soft metallurgy. They get seized into the rotor, and it's almost impossible to get them out without stripping them. I know what you're gonna say. Impact driver, dummy. Hey, you know what? I've used enough impact drivers to know that they, A, don't always work, B, frequently break, and strip the screw. So a screwdriver clearly doesn't work here, and an impact driver is definitely not a surefire way to get these out, which is why I always go to a hammer and a chisel. I don't even touch a screwdriver to get these things out until I've gotten them broken loose. So what you want to do here is get yourself some space and use your chisel to make a dimple in the outside edge of the screw. All right, now you've got yourself a little bit of a nub to grab onto with the chisel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cant the chisel this way to give it a torque effect at a tangent. Now I got it broken loose. So now you can go back with a screwdriver and unscrew it the rest of the way. I know that doesn't seem like a really simple way to do this, but as soon as you strip out that hex inside there, you're going to be here drilling, and it's going to be a pain in the butt. So even if you do try the other methods with an impact driver or a conventional screwdriver, if you strip this, just get a hammer and chisel and knock it free that way. Now these rotors are thicker than the standard rotors are, so even if you aren't changing out your pads, you may find that you need to retract the caliper pistons a little bit to get them over the rotors. It's a couple of millimeters that we're working with here, so we already did a video on changing the brake pads in this car, so definitely pull that up for some more tutorial on compressing these calipers. AF, all right. Little bit of extra thickness makes a big difference. Now we got the rotors on the car. Definitely keep in mind that you have to keep those caliper pistons pushed all the way in. These rotors are about 2 millimeters thicker than the original rotors are. That gives it a little bit more mass, which has even more heat capacity than the original rotors have. They're also a fraction smaller diameter, and that's just because that's the size rotor that Racingbrake has available for this car. They have many different standard sizes, and this one is just a smidge smaller than stock. But that's okay because the brake pad actually goes all the way to the edge with these rotors, and you won't develop a lip on the outside with the Racingbrake rotors like you will with the originals. So all around, they've thought these through 10 different ways to Sunday. You're going to hear some slight dragging, and that's just because the pads have to wear into the new rotors. There's a bed-in process that you'll want to do with these, so you might get a little bit of dragging until everything is furnished in properly. These brake rotors look fantastic. Talk about wish it would have came that way from the factory. Although the intricacy in the design of these rotors, you can totally understand why this type of rotor belongs on an enthusiast modified car, not necessarily from a factory Acura. But I'm really proud to offer these RB rotors on the Heel Toe website because they complement the Type S in so many ways. It's performance oriented, they look amazing, they fit the character of the car, but not only that, she needs them. She's a big car, uses a lot of stopping power, and all the cooling you can have. I've taken this car to the track a couple times already, and that's how the rotors got in the condition that they're in. I really want to see how these things hold up. Maybe with the stock brake pads, but I'm really going to try to get something aftermarket in there as well. Really see what the braking on this car can be like. These massive tires and now these amazing brakes. So with that, we really appreciate you watching this video. I'm sorry we don't have time to show you any driving clips yet. We're going to do sort of a recap on everything we've done on this car in an upcoming video just to get you up to speed with the HT spec TLX-S. Thank you very much for watching, and definitely stay tuned for more videos on this car and all the other cars that we do here at Heel Toe Automotive. We're in your corner. Have a good day.